CTV News political commentator Scott Reid is standing by. Hey, Scott, good to see you. Happy Tuesday, my friend.
Happy Tuesday, Todd.
Hey, a big turnout for the Conservatives last night in Edmonton, about 15,000 people, and there was former Prime Minister Stephan Harper up on stage, a rare public appearance for him, endorsing Pierre Poilievre. Your takeaway?
Yeah, good night for the Conservatives. I mean, look, just to put this in perspective, as people listening, I don't know, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000. Look, if you can pull out between 12 and 15,000 people to a political rally in Canada, you are sitting a new high water mark. Okay, this is extraordinary territory. So just to put this in perspective, in the old days, back under Pierre Trudeau, they used to close the campaigns out in the 1970s with a rally at Maple Leaf Gardens. That maybe approached these numbers. This is big. And the endorsement of Stephan Harper, with all the calm and economic credentials that he brings, his time in office during the 2009 financial crisis, that's all to the positive for Poilievre. So mark that down, a clearly good day for them.
We're going to show the polling, if we can, from Nanos Research, the overnight polling, just to give our viewers a sense of where things stand. And then I want to ask you a question. So we have the Liberals at 42.7. That's a drop of 3. We have the Conservatives at 38.1. That's an increase of 3. That rally, is it possible that, there is a certain sentiment, emotion, energy out there for the Conservatives that may not be totally reflected in some of these polls, Scott?
Yes. But that's not necessarily a good thing for the Conservatives. It's almost certain that their base is extraordinarily motivated. We saw this during the leadership campaign for Pierre Poilievre. He just demolished his opponents in a way that we hadn't really seen before. Listen to me, I sound like Donald Trump. Never seen the like of it before. But it's true. The challenge for Poilievre is that these numbers are still these numbers. So it may be that he'll get every ounce of juice out of his base, but will he get enough beyond that in order to win the election? And that's also a challenge for the Liberals. They're going to have to think to themselves, well, if our vote's not quite as wildly motivated, what can we do to light a fire under them? How do we make certain that we don't see some drift or softening in our vote? How do we make certain, as the Liberals, that the NDP don't stage a rally and come back from, what's a very low mark for them traditionally and historically? So there's plenty of campaign left in this campaign, no question about it.
What would you do in terms of advice for the NDP? You touched on it there. They're hemorrhaging support. They're at about 8%. That's like a 25-year low. Is there anything they can do? What would you suggest?
Well, I think two things. One, I would go negative on Mark Carney and make it uncomfortable for traditional NDP voters who've just drifted over to Carney and the Liberals because they are so alarmed at the prospect of Donald Trump and a Poilievre win. So I'd make it uncomfortable for those voters, try to recoup them by going really hard, giving them facts, telling them things about Mark Carney that make them uncomfortable. So that's the first thing I would do. The second thing I would do is sometime between now and Election Day, I would look squarely into the camera if I was Jagmeet Singh, and I would say, we're not going to win this election, but we damn near need to hold people accountable because we're going to face some really difficult, really historic choices. And if you don't have a group of New Democrats to keep these guys honest, it could be tough. I don't know if that argument will win. That is a traditional NDP argument, but it has to be wed to the concession that you're not going to win this election and you're fighting for the furniture. I think if they do that, that may cause some of those traditional NDP voters to rally. And in a weird sort of phenomenon, one other thing they need is for Mark Carney to do really well, which doesn't sound logical, but if NDP voters become convinced that the Liberals are going to win no matter what, they may not be as willing to lend him their votes. They may say, well, I can afford to go back to my traditional home because the Liberals have got this locked in anyway. So they're going to need that dynamic in the last 3 days of the campaign.
Hey, just quickly before we go, how would you characterize how Mark Carney has done so far? His first election campaign, he's not a career politician. Your take halfway through this?
Well, look, on the most superficial of levels, he started with a 26-point deficit, according to our pollster, Nick Nanos, and he's now somewhere between a 5 and 10-point advantage. So that's a 30 to 35-point swing. I'd say that's good. I think by any standard, that ain't bad. As a candidate, though, if we want to be a little more circumspect, as a candidate on the campaign trail, you can see rust falling off of him. You can see signs of green. You can see that this isn't someone who's spent his life as an elected politician and has all the skills of a retail politician at the ready. On the other hand, on those days and in those events where he's been called upon to look, sound, and conduct himself as a prime minister, as a national leader, he's been outstanding. And that's really been the secret to his success. With Donald Trump creating this external threat that's so overwhelming, he has looked and sounded like the sort of leader the country wants and needs. And the question for him is, can he sustain that? Will events allow him to sustain that? Will his own performance, construction of his campaign allow him to sustain that? And we do see the polls tightening. And I don't know that the Liberals had a crackerjack of a day. So we'll have to see.
Thanks for this, Scott. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Scott Reid, CTV News political commentator.